So what are the problems with the oxygen transport if we are exposed to the carbon monoxide or we are at a higher altitude? Okay, so we are going to look at these two effects onto the oxygen transportation. Okay, so now let us look at this. The first things called carbon monoxide. So carbon monoxide, or we call CO, is formed when the carbon containing compound burn incompletely. So for example, the car left running in the attached garage, okay, portable generator, okay, so we have these corroded or disconnected water heater when piped. So those are incomplete combustions. What will happen here is they're going to produce the CO. Particularly last times when you have, means in the European country during winter, we're going to burn the charcoal, the woods, okay, so that they can heat up the house, right? The chimney there. So this is one of the main source of the carbon monoxide. Okay, now what's the problem here? When these fumes are inhaled, the carbon monoxide readily diffuse across the wall of the alveoli and combine with the heme group highlights in the hemoglobin or molecule, forming carboxyhemoglobin. So it means that, guys, we have two items or two chemicals that can bind to the heme group. Okay, what we have learned with a heme group, so O2 and carbon monoxide, CO. And in fact, CO actually, okay, have higher affinity. Hemoglobin actually have higher affinity to carbon monoxides rather than the O2, yeah? Okay, means that CO likes carbon monoxide more than O2. So how many times? About 250 times more readily compared to oxygen. So means that if you have 250 molecule oxygen, maybe hemoglobin will bind to one of them. But if you have one molecule of the carbon monoxide, hemoglobin confirm will bind to the this carbon monoxide because they have higher affinity. Okay. So even though the concentrations, if the concentration of carbon monoxide is much lower than the concentration of oxygen, the high proportion of hemoglobin will still combine with the carbon monoxide. And the combinations or the combines of the hemoglobin with the carbon monoxide forming this carboxyhemoglobin and this very stable compound. The process is irreversible. Okay? When Hb combined to the carbon monoxide, this compound is very, very stable and it will be remained combined for a very, very long time. Okay. So this CO, where is the CO coming from? If let's say we are not exposed to this, okay, then the main one actually when we smoke. Okay, so cigarette smoke actually contains about 5% of carbon monoxide. If cigarette smoke is breathed in pure for any length of time, we will die of the asphyxiation. So it means that not enough oxygen. Our hemoglobin will bind to the carbon monoxide that we inhale it. But even those smokers who inhale and breathe in, okay, when you smoke, we also breathe in some normal air. So therefore, the carbon monoxide concentration in the lung actually much more lower already because you breathe in the normal air. Are you clear? You dilute something that dilutes the carbon monoxide. However, around 5% hemoglobin in a regular smoker blood is permanently combined with CO. So therefore, reduce the oxygen carrying capacity. So it means that this is luckily, we say luckily, because every 120 days we produce a new red blood cells, correct or not? Okay, not every 120 days, every day we produce, okay, every day we produce new red blood cells. So when we produce new red blood cell means that we have new hemoglobin. But even though we produce new hemoglobin constantly, because a regular smoker will smoke every day, so constantly you can see that they have 5% of the hemoglobin permanently bind with the CO. So means that for us, our saturation can up to 95%. Their saturation actually will be much more lower. Are you clear? At the same altitude, we may get 95%. For them, they may be able to get 90% saturations only. Are you clear? Okay, so this is the effects of the CO onto our hemoglobin. So therefore, the idea here is to read the presence of the CO When you bind to hemoglobin, forming this carboxyhemoglobin, therefore you're going to reduce the oxygen carrying capacity in our blood. Okay, the smoker blood. So what are the signs and symptoms of the carbon monoxide poisoning? Again, it's not in our syllabus. For example, headache, nausea, breathlessness, then you start collapse, dizzy, and loss of consciousness. So CO poisoning, most of the time you can see that your body will start to think, okay, you start to react because lack of the oxygen. So suddenly in one room, okay, you start to have headache or nausea, you will feel vomiting, and you was like suffocated, you won't be able to breathe in normally, then you might be exposed to CO poisoning already. So immediately get yourself out of the room. Okay, so sometimes you do not know you are in the room, maybe you got the exhaust pipe, okay, or exhaust or vent, or this what we call the connections, okay, to the some burning, okay, so there's a leakage of the CO that you do not know. Okay, so immediately move yourself out from the room. Okay, so what is the treatment? The treatment of carbon monoxide poisoning involves an administration of pure oxygens and also carbon dioxide. So why pure oxygen? We want to increase, the affinity is low, definitely, but we increase the number of the oxygen with pure oxygen, then we hope that those hemoglobin that those hemoglobin molecules that haven't bound to CO have chance to bind with the oxygen. Are you clear? So allow our body to get rid of CO. But those who are already bound to CO, we can't do anything anymore. Are you clear? Okay. And also we give this carbon dioxide. So what is the function of carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide, actually, we in our body, we do have the chemoreceptor to check on this carbon dioxide. If the carbon dioxide is too high in our body, then our body will think that we don't ventilate enough. We don't breathe in, and the breathing rate is not fast enough. So in this case, we want to breathe in more oxygen, remove CO. Okay, so how we do this? We actually give carbon dioxide so that our body will be tricked, will be fooled by the carbon dioxide. So mean our body think, oh, our body have more CO2. Why have more CO2? Is it we didn't breathe in enough? Then it will trigger our body to breathe more. So when you breathe more, then you take in more oxygen and release more CO. Okay, so this is what we call as a carbon monoxide poisoning. Now, okay, something that we're going to tell you guys. Okay, wait. So the next part here, we're going to look at how this high altitude actually will affect our oxygen transportation. Okay, as we know that when we climb up higher, the higher we have, the oxygen's partial pressure in the lungs will be lower. So as I said that at sea level, you can see that the partial pressure oxygen in the alveolus in the lung is about 10 to 12 kilopascal. So at this partial pressure, hemoglobin is almost completely saturated with the oxygen, roughly about 95% Carnot saturation. But the thing here is when you climb out higher and higher, can you see the oxygen concentration is lower? So if we go high about like 5,000 feet, you can see the oxygen concentration low, drop down to 84. If we go up to about like 14,000 feet, oxygen concentration drop to 61%. If we go up to Mount Everest, about 8,000 meters, then you can see the oxygen concentration drop to about 33%. Okay, so therefore the percentage of partial pressure oxygen in the lung will be lower. So if we're lower, according to the oxygen dissociation curve, the percentage saturation definitely lower. Okay, so at the mountain height about 6,500 meters, the partial pressure oxygen in the air about 10 kilopascal, but the lung will be roughly about 5.3 kilopascal only, and you can see that percentage saturation will be about 70%. So the lack of oxygen carried around the body, the person now you start to feel breathless already. So if a person travel quickly over a period just a few days from sea level to very high altitude, they may develop this what we call the altitude sickness. So what actually happened during this period of time, because your body, your tissues cannot receive sufficient oxygen, so the blood actually moves slower in the capillary, and it will cause the dilations of the arteriole to give more blood. Are you clear? So the arteriole dilates, particularly in the brain dilates. Why dilate? Because we need to supply more oxygen. So arteriole dilates so that more blood can enter into the capillary. But the problem here is when the arteriole dilates, we increase the blood flow in the capillary. Then in the capillary, the fluid start to leak out. Your blood plasma leak out from the blood capillary. We're going to learn about this when we on next week. Okay, next week when we look at how these tissue fluids can be formed. Okay, so when this blood flow into the capillary and leak out, the tissue fluid leak out, it will cause the disorientation because of compression increase the pressure, cranial pressure in your brain. It will cause this disorientation. Then the fluid also may leak into the lung, preventing them from functioning properly. Because now inside the tissue fluids inside our lungs also will be accumulated. So this always fatal. Means that we are going to die because you can't breathe in the air, your brain can't think properly. Okay, so how we do this? We can reverse it by going down to lower altitudes and supply them with the oxygen tank. So that's why when you climb up to the mountain high, like for example, you go for the Mount Everest, definitely you need to carry the oxygen tank. Okay, but our body actually can slowly acclimatize to this high altitude. Means that our body will make a change. But this change won't take place within 1 or 2 days. It may take place roughly about 2 to 3 weeks time. Okay, so when we acclimatize basically means that adjust to this high altitude so that our body now produce more red blood cells. Are you clear? So when you produce more red blood cells, therefore I will have more hemoglobin per unit blood, or per unit volume of blood. Now, we increase red blood cells, number of red blood cells per unit blood, but the number of hemoglobin in the red blood cells is almost remains the same. No change in the number of red blood cells. I say no change in the number of hemoglobin per cell. But because we increase the number of red blood cells per unit blood or per unit volume of the blood, therefore you can see that our hemoglobin concentrations also increase. What's so important? This is to compensate with more hemoglobins, then we can increase the efficiency of the oxygen transfer from the lung to the tissues. Okay, so let's look at a simple calculation. If originally at sea level, the percentage saturation is about 95%. Correct or not? So if I have 100 hemoglobin, so means that 95 hemoglobins will be, okay, put a layman term, very simple, 95% of them will be oxyhemoglobins, a full in this case, okay, right, okay, 95%. So means that I will have 95 oxyhemoglobin, okay, just a very simple calculation. It's not true, it will calculate this way, but at high altitude, so percentage of saturation is now dropped to about 70%. If I still with 100 molecule of hemoglobin, with 70% of it, so I will get about 70 oxyhemoglobin. May not have enough. So I increase the number of hemoglobin. Okay, let's say to 130 hemoglobin. So 70% of the 130, let me do calculations now. Okay, someone calculate for me. How many oxyhemoglobin we're going to have? How many? Let me, I need the calculator now. My brains cannot. So you get about 91. Okay, about 91 oxyhemoglobin. So can you see that it's almost near to the what we have at the sea level. But this is not a really true way to calculate. It's just that to get you guys understand the concept, how we can compensate it by increase the number of red blood cells. Because when increase the number of red blood cells means that we have more hemoglobin available per unit blood, then therefore we can compensate with the low percentage saturations of the red blood cell at high altitude. Are you clear? So by increase. So one of the hormone involved here is called erythropoietin, EPO. EPO is a hormone that released by our kidney. Okay, by our kidney, this hormone released by our kidney, so that our bone marrow will know. Okay, our bone marrow know when the EPO released, our bone marrow know, oh yeah, we need to produce more red blood cells. So the EPO caused the increase in the red blood cells. Are you clear? So increase the number of red blood cells, therefore we will be able to compensate with the lower percentage saturation, okay, by having more hemoglobin per unit blood. Okay, so after acclimatized, you can see that they have broad chest, so therefore they have larger lung capacity. The heart always means larger than the person who live in the low altitude, particularly in the right side. Okay, they also have more hemoglobin in their blood than usual, increased efficiency of the oxygen transport from the lung to tissues. Okay, so with this, I have done for the problems associated with the O2 transportations. Okay, so with this, I end for the lessons today.